This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Aaron Matte. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin today with student loans. When President Obama signed it into law this month, the Bipartisan Student Loan Certainty Act was hailed as a major victory for students. The bill reversed a temporary doubling of the interest rate on federally subsidized Stafford student loans that took effect in July. Most students will pay a low rate of around 3.8% through 2015. But then see that rate jump as it becomes attached to financial markets. At the signing ceremony, President Obama praised Congress for reaching an agreement, but he warned the temporary fix in rates doesn't address the underlying problem, the massive cost of college tuition and the debt burden imposed on students and their families.
Even though we've been able to stabilize the interest rates on student loans, our job's not done because the cost of college remains extraordinarily high. It's out of reach for a lot of folks, and for those who do end up attending college, the amount of debt that young people are coming out of school with is a huge burden on them. It's a burden on their families. It makes it more difficult for them to buy a home. It makes them more difficult for them if they want to start a business. It has a depressive effect on the economy overall, and we've got to do something about it.
President Obama speaking in the Oval Office earlier this month. Well, our next guest has just written an in-depth piece exploring the nation's soaring education costs and their dangers. In the latest edition of Rolling Stone, Matt Taibbi argues that the high price of college tuition and the federal expansion of student debt to pay for it pose a major threat to the economy. As Taibbi writes, quote, "The dirty secret of American higher education is that student loan interest rates are almost irrelevant. It's not the cost of the loan that's the problem. It's the principal, the appallingly high tuition costs that have been, soaring at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation, an irrational upward trajectory eerily reminiscent of skyrocketing housing prices in the years before 2008. Throw off the mystery, and what you'll uncover is a shameful and oppressive outrage that for years now has been systematically perpetrated against a generation of young adults." Matt Taibbi's article is called "Ripping Off Young America, the College Loan Scandal." He's a political reporter for Rolling Stone. Matt, welcome to Democracy Now! So lay it out for us. What is this scandal as you describe it?
Well, there's this overall connection between the sort of, and it's very much like the housing crisis where there was a limitless availability of credit that drove housing prices upward and upward until finally they collapsed. We have a similar dynamic going on here where there's sort of this bottomless well of government credit that keeps driving college costs up. And the difference here is not that it's a market-based problem, it's more that the government has limitless collection powers, so it has no fear of lending, and it continues to lend and lend and lend. And no matter how many defaults they get, they actually, some have argued that they actually make money on defaults, and they're projecting a profit of $185 billion over the next 10 years.
How do they make money on the defaults?
Through fees and penalties. So even when people default, and it's not clear exactly how high the number is of defaults, but they're able to farm those accounts out to collection services. And for instance, a couple of years ago, the government projected a recovery rate of 122% for all forms of Stafford loans that were in default. Now this year it's a little bit lower. It's somewhere between 103 and 109%, but it's still above 100%, which gives you an indication of how easily they're able to collect from people in default.
Matt, can you explain what measures the government can take to collect as compared to other defaults on different forms of loans?
Sure. They can attach basically anything. They can attach a salary. They can attach a disability check. They can attach a tax return. They can prevent people from serving in the military. In some cases, they can prevent people from obtaining professional licenses. Basically, they have obviously all the government's tools at their disposal to fine people. So the recovery rate is much, much higher than it would be, say, for private credit cards. It's probably 5 or 6 times higher than it is for that form of consumer debt.
Your part of the power of your story is the examples. Talk about the 38-year-old attorney who had a pulmonary embolism.
Right. Yeah. This is a guy who just a few years out of law school had a pulmonary embolism. He became fully disabled. A few years after that, he became bedridden. He was unable to work. he started receiving disability checks, and the instant he started getting his disability checks, he noticed that the government was garnishing $170 a month from his disability checks to pay for his student loans that he obviously took out to go to law school. And this is a story that I heard. I heard a couple of similar stories. I heard a number of stories from women who wrote in saying that they didn't have children because of their student loans. I had more than one person contact me and say that they had turned to a life of crime to pay for their student loans, because interestingly, because that was one form of income that they could obtain that the government couldn't attach. And so it's unbelievable the stories I got from people about their student loans and the effect they had on people's lives.
And many people thought that this problem was at least partially solved in 2010 when Obama won that bill that basically revamped the student loan industry. Can you talk about what that was and why that did not go far enough?
Sure. Obviously, it was a good idea, I think. They essentially took out the middleman in the administration of federally backed student loans. Now the government lends directly to students, which theoretically is a good idea. There's no middleman out there making extra profit, so that profit cost has been removed. But a few years ago, when they made that reform, the Congressional Budget Office projected that essentially that they were saving about $90 billion in profits that would have been collected by those private lenders as middlemen. But the projected profit now over the same time period for the government is twice as high. The government now projects that it's going to make $185 billion over the next 10 years in student loans. And of course, that's just earning on interest and fees and penalties over that time period.
We're going to break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Senator Elizabeth Warren and also ask you, Matt Taibbi, about the actual costs of the colleges that the government is subsidizing and then that students are paying for the rest of their lives in some cases. We're talking to Matt Taibbi of the Rolling Stone. Stay with us.